Well, the trouble is, it's not a holiday. It's always one of those terrible things when...
King Charles has uncovered something about Diana that stayed hidden for almost 3 decades. A truth so powerful that it has shaken him deeply and compelled him to rethink everything he believed about their marriage, her death, and the decisions he once made. What he discovered transforms the entire narrative. The discovery that changed everything. On the evening of November 28, 2025, King Charles was alone inside his private study at Clarence House when he stumbled upon something that would completely transform how he understood his own past. He had been going through personal belongings, letters, photographs, and old documents that had sat untouched for years, as part of a quiet effort he began after ascending the throne. His goal was simple but personal: to organize his private records so that his legacy would one day be clearly preserved. Yet hidden among those boxes and folders was something long forgotten, something misfiled, mislabeled, or possibly placed where it would remain unseen. How it came to be in Charles's possession is still uncertain, whether it was always destined to reach him or whether history simply placed it there by chance. Regardless, it appeared before him that night, undeniable and impossible to dismiss. Charles remained seated at his desk for more than 3 hours, carefully reading and rereading what he had uncovered. Staff members passing the study later reported that the lights were still on well after midnight, unusual for a king known for maintaining a disciplined routine. When he finally emerged, witnesses described someone who looked as though he had aged years in a single night. His expression was strained, his eyes bloodshot, and he quietly requested that his morning schedule be cleared without offering any explanation. The next day brought a series of remarkable phone calls. Charles spoke with Prince William for more than an hour, a discussion described by sources as both emotional and painful. He then contacted Prince Harry, despite their ongoing strain, insisting that an immediate conversation was necessary. He also reached out to several people who had been close to Diana, asking about moments from 30 years earlier and seeking confirmation of details that now carried unexpected weight. Inside the palace, confusion spread. Something significant had occurred, yet Charles revealed nothing. He instructed his private secretaries to locate specific individuals, including some who had not interacted with the royal family for decades. He requested access to further archives, even materials sealed since Diana's death. Much of his time was spent alone, wrestling with revelations that clearly challenged everything he believed about his own history. Though the word secret often suggests scandal or shame, those close to Charles say his reaction told a different story. He did not appear furious or betrayed. Instead, he seemed overwhelmed by grief and regret, as if the truth revealed not Diana's wrongdoing, but his own misunderstanding or failure to truly see her while she was alive. In the days that followed, his behavior noticeably changed. During official duties, he appeared distant, fulfilling obligations while clearly distracted. He canceled several private gatherings, something he rarely does. In quiet conversations with trusted confidants, he spoke of Diana with a level of reflection and remorse that surprised even those who had known him for decades. What Charles actually discovered remains unknown. The palace has stayed completely silent, an unusual response in itself. Normally, personal crises find their way into whispers and leaks, but this time, absolute discretion has been maintained. Either silence was demanded, or those aware of the truth understood it was far too personal to become rumor. Still, Charles's actions reveal much. Diana left something behind, something that captured her true feelings, her honest view of their marriage, perhaps even her hopes for her sons and for Charles himself. Whatever it was, revealed a truth he never fully understood during her life or in the nearly 30 years since her passing. The discovery forced Charles to confront painful questions about his role in Diana's unhappiness, about decisions that once seemed reasonable but now feel deeply flawed. It offered insight into who Diana truly was beneath the public image, a vulnerable, complex woman struggling within royal expectations while trying to be a good mother, a good person, and even a devoted wife in a marriage already unraveling. Most painfully, it showed him what might have been different had he understood her sooner, had he chosen differently, had he given her what she truly needed rather than what he believed she needed. It is the kind of realization that permanently reshapes how one views their own past. For a man devoted his entire life to duty and tradition, often uncomfortable with deep emotional expression, this discovery was profoundly unsettling. Yet, in an unexpected way, it also brought clarity. For the first time, Charles truly understands the woman he married, the mother of his children, and the loss that quietly shaped everything that followed. What Diana truly left behind. The secret King Charles uncovered was not a single letter or isolated document, but an entire collection, a deeply personal archive that Diana had deliberately assembled during the final years of her life. People familiar with the situation describe it as a mix of written reflections, recorded conversations, and personal keepsakes that together form an unusually complete portrait of Diana's inner world at a time when her marriage was unraveling and her public presence was at its height. Diana began compiling this archive sometime in 1994, shortly after Charles publicly acknowledged his affair with Camilla Parker Bowles during a televised interview. Although she had been aware of the relationship for years, the public admission devastated her. The humiliation of having her husband's infidelity confirmed on national television pushed her to finally act on an idea she had considered for some time, to preserve her own truth in her own voice, for a future moment when she would no longer be alive to speak for herself. The archive contains handwritten journals, not daily diaries, but extended reflections written during quiet moments when Diana felt overwhelmed by her thoughts and emotions. These writings were not cautious or calculated with history in mind. They were unfiltered, sincere, and at times contradictory, revealing a woman struggling to understand an unbearable situation. Diana wrote extensively about her love for William and Harry, her fears for what lay ahead for them, her belief that the royal system was failing her sons, and her desperate determination to shield them from the harm she herself had endured. She also wrote about Charles, and this is where the discovery takes on deeper meaning. Diana did not simply catalog his shortcomings as a husband or dwell on her pain over Camilla. Instead, she wrote with striking complexity about who Charles was as a person, his strengths, his limitations, the emotional damage from his childhood, and the ways duty and expectation had confined him just as they had confined her. She reflected on moments of genuine closeness they shared, brief times when she saw the man he might have become under different circumstances. Even more unexpectedly, Diana confronted her own failings. She admitted to being manipulative at times, to allowing her emotional instability to worsen conflicts, and to using the boys as leverage during disputes with Charles. She acknowledged her affairs and explored not only that they occurred, but why. Her hunger for affection, her wish to hurt Charles as she felt hurt herself, and her hope that someone outside royal life might truly see and love her. The archive also includes audio recordings. During this period, Diana spoke with several therapists, and she kept recordings of certain sessions, apparently with full awareness and permission. These tapes chronicle her struggle with bulimia, her battles with depression and anxiety, and her conflicted feelings about being Princess of Wales. They also reveal her growth, a developing emotional awareness and a clearer understanding of her situation beyond raw reaction. Perhaps the most moving pieces are letters Diana wrote but never sent. There are letters to William and Harry, intended to be opened when they were older, explaining her decisions during their childhood. There are also letters to Charles, some furious, some gentle, some painfully open, expressing thoughts she never managed to say to him face to face. Yet the most important item in the archive is a long letter written directly to Charles, dated August 15, 1997, just 2 weeks before her death. Diana sealed it with instructions that it be opened only by Charles after she died. Due to administrative confusion or a deliberate choice by those managing her estate, the letter was never delivered following the accident in Paris. Instead, it was stored with other personal belongings, mislabeled, and forgotten for nearly 3 decades. This letter is what Charles discovered on November 2025. According to those aware of its contents, it represents Diana's most complete and honest statement about their marriage, their divorce, and their shared future as parents. She wrote it during a relatively calm period, after the most painful aspects of the divorce were resolved, but before she entered a new romantic stability with Dodi Fayed. In the letter, Diana reportedly acknowledged that their marriage was doomed from the beginning, not because either of them was a bad person, but because they were fundamentally incompatible, and because the circumstances surrounding their courtship and wedding were impossible. She reflected on the immense pressure, the constant scrutiny, and the expectations neither of them could meet. She expressed sincere understanding of Charles's position, torn between duty and personal happiness, raised to suppress emotion, unable to give her the romantic love she longed for. But Diana also wrote something that deeply shattered Charles. She expressed love for him, not the youthful passion of their early years or the resentment of their later conflict, but a mature, clear-sighted affection for the father of her children and the man with whom she shared some of the most defining years of her life. She wrote that she forgave him for the pain he caused and hoped he could forgive her for her role in their shared failure. The letter was an act of grace from a woman who had every reason to remain bitter, yet had done the emotional work to move beyond it. It was Diana offering Charles something she never truly gave him during their marriage: understanding and acceptance of who he was, rather than disappointment in who he was not. And it arrived 27 years too late, discovered by chance, read by a man who had spent nearly 3 decades believing Diana died hating him. The hidden reality of their marriage. What Diana's secret archive exposes about her marriage to Charles fundamentally challenges the simplified versions that have shaped public perception for more than 3 decades. The story most people know, and often accept as the full truth, is one of a cold, emotionally distant older man who never truly loved his young bride, who used her to produce heirs while maintaining his real relationship with his mistress, and who pushed a vulnerable woman toward despair through neglect and infidelity. That version is not entirely false. Charles was emotionally unavailable. He did continue his relationship with Camilla. Diana suffered deeply, but the archive reveals layers of complexity that neither strongly pro-Diana nor strongly pro-Charles perspectives have wanted to confront. Because complexity does not translate easily into tabloid headlines or simple narratives of heroes and villains. Diana's journals and letters show that in the early period of their marriage, Charles genuinely attempted to make her happy, but he tried to show care in ways that made sense to him. He bought her gifts, arranged activities he believed she would enjoy, and made efforts to include her in his own interests. The core problem was that his efforts were profoundly mismatched with what Diana actually needed. She craved constant reassurance, physical closeness, emotional openness, and intense romantic love. Charles, by contrast, offered thoughtful gestures, intellectual companionship, and a partnership centered on duty. Diana writes about nights when she cried herself to sleep while Charles worked at his desk, unaware of her pain despite being in the same room. She describes his confusion when she became distressed over issues that seemed minor to him, and his frustration when she could not simply steady herself and continue with scheduled obligations. Yet she also admits that she never clearly told him what she needed. She expected him to know, to instinctively understand her emotions, to read her mind the way romantic partners do in films. The archive also shows that Camilla's role in Charles's life was more complicated than the simple idea of a constant affair. There were stretches when Charles sincerely tried to distance himself from Camilla to focus on his marriage. Diana notes moments when she recognized this effort and felt genuine hope that things might improve. At the same time, she acknowledges that her own insecurity and suspicion made it nearly impossible for those efforts to succeed. One especially revealing journal entry describes an incident from 1985 when Charles planned a private weekend for the two of them in an attempt to reconnect. Diana, suspicious of his intentions, believed it was some form of manipulation. She spent the entire weekend distant and hostile, rejecting his attempts at conversation and intimacy. Eventually, Charles withdrew, hurt and confused. Diana later realized that his awkward effort had been sincere, but by then the opportunity was gone. Diana also writes openly about her affairs, with James Hewitt and with others who were never publicly named. She explains that she was not primarily seeking sex, though it was part of it. What she wanted was to feel desired, valued, and understood, to experience the romantic intensity missing from her marriage. She admits, however, that these affairs were ultimately hollow, and that the men involved often used her for their own purposes. What emerges from the archive is the portrait of two people catastrophically mismatched, yet both trying, in their own flawed ways, to make an impossible situation work. Charles's inability to provide emotional intimacy was not simple coldness. It was a limitation shaped by his upbringing, his training to suppress emotion, and his lack of any model for emotional availability. Diana's need for constant reassurance and dramatic expressions of love was not mere neediness. It stemmed from her own childhood wounds, her father's emotional distance, her mother's abandonment, and her deep insecurity about her worth. The tragedy, Diana writes in one especially powerful passage, was that they might have helped each other heal had they understood what they were both facing. Charles needed someone who could show him that emotions were not dangerous and that vulnerability was not weakness. Diana needed someone who could offer steady, reliable presence even when she was difficult. Neither possessed the self-awareness or emotional tools to give the other what was needed. What Charles has discovered in Diana's archive is not that he was blameless or that Diana was secretly at fault. He has discovered that the truth was more nuanced, more human, more mutually tragic than either the Charles or pro-Diana narratives have acknowledged. He was not a villain, but neither was he a victim. Diana was not a saint, but neither was she unstable and unreasonable. They were two people who hurt each other badly, while also occasionally showing each other genuine kindness and struggling, in their limited ways, to make an impossible situation workable. Why Diana chose to keep this secret? The question that now haunts Charles, and that will trouble anyone who learns about Diana's archive, is why she created such a detailed and painfully honest record, yet kept it hidden, tucked away where it might never be discovered. Why would Diana pour her heart into preserving her truth, without making sure it reached the people who most needed to hear it? The answer reveals something deeply revealing about who Diana had become in the final years of her life, and what her suffering had taught her. Diana kept this secret because she had come to understand that certain truths are too dangerous to speak, while emotions remain raw, and while the power structures that caused harm are still intact. She learned this lesson through experience, particularly through her involvement in Andrew Morton's biography and her explosive Panorama interview with Martin Bashir. On both occasions, she shared parts of her truth publicly, and each time the fallout was devastating, not only for Charles and the royal family, but for her sons and ultimately for herself. After the Panorama interview in November 1995, Diana watched the consequences unfold. The Queen moved swiftly toward forcing a divorce. Diana's standing within the royal family became even more fragile. Most painfully, William and Harry were subjected to relentless media scrutiny over their parents' bitter conflict. William, in particular, was angry with his mother, feeling she had exposed their private family pain to the public. So, when Diana began compiling her archive, she made a deliberate choice. This was for later, for a time when emotions had cooled, when her sons were grown and capable of processing difficult truths without being harmed by them, and when even Charles might be able to listen without the defensiveness that defined their marriage. Diana was creating a time capsule, not a weapon. There was also her own ongoing transformation. The therapy sessions recorded in the archive show a woman actively reshaping her understanding of herself and her circumstances. Early on, she spoke almost entirely as a victim. Charles was cold, the institution was cruel, and she was blameless. Over time, as she engaged in painful self-examination, her perspective evolved. She began recognizing her own manipulative tendencies, her emotional volatility, and the ways she had contributed to the collapse of her marriage. This growth created a dilemma. If Diana revealed her truth while she was still processing it, she risked presenting an incomplete and distorted picture. It might reflect her feelings in a single moment, but not her fuller, more mature understanding. So, she waited, continuing to add to the archive as her insight deepened, planning to decide its fate once she reached emotional clarity. Diana also kept the secret because she feared how Charles might respond if he received it too soon. Despite her growing compassion for him, she did not fully trust him. She worried that offering forgiveness and understanding while they were still entangled in divorce negotiations, custody issues, and public image battles might allow her vulnerability to be used against her. Perhaps most importantly, Diana never intended the secret to remain hidden forever. She was waiting until she could reveal it properly. The archive was not meant to be stumbled upon decades after her death. She was working toward resolution, toward a moment when her truth might heal rather than harm. Later journal entries hint that she planned to write a book one day, not a sensational tell-all, but a thoughtful memoir shaped by hard-won wisdom. She wanted to help others trapped in damaging relationships, struggling with mental health, or crushed by systems they never chose. In a journal entry from July 1997, Diana writes about a therapy discussion on timing. She notes that she is not yet ready to share her full truth because she has not fully forgiven herself. She writes that she must reach genuine self-acceptance before speaking with the clarity she desires. She sets a tentative goal. By her 40th birthday in July 1998, she would decide how to share what she had learned. But Diana never turned 40. She died 2 weeks after writing her final letter to Charles, before completing her emotional journey and before deciding how to reveal her archive. What was meant to be temporary protection became permanent, sealed away by sudden death and the administrative confusion that followed her funeral. Charles now understands that Diana intended for him to know these things eventually. The letter he found makes that clear. She wanted him to see her perspective, to understand that she did not die hating him, but she wanted control over when and how that understanding reached him, and death took that control away. This realization has deepened Charles's grief. It means Diana was moving toward reconciliation, toward maturity, toward a cooperative and perhaps even warm relationship. Had she lived another year, 2 years, 5 years, they might have spoken honestly and acknowledged the tragedy of their marriage without blame. Diana kept her secret for meaningful reasons. To protect her sons, to wait for the right moment, to avoid turning truth into a weapon while emotions were still destructive. But the randomness of her death meant the secret remained hidden far longer than she intended, reaching Charles decades too late and costing them the chance for healing while both were still alive. The legacy Diana truly left. The revelation of Diana's secret archive forces a deep rethinking of her legacy and what she genuinely left behind for the world. For almost 3 decades, Diana has been remembered through competing narratives: the people's princess who brought warmth and humanity to a cold institution, or the troubled woman whose instability harmed the monarchy. Both versions contain elements of truth, yet both reduce a far more complex individual into flattened extremes. What Diana actually left behind, as revealed through her archive, is more meaningful than either sainthood or scandal. She left proof of real psychological and emotional growth, of a person doing the hard work of self-understanding, accepting responsibility for her own mistakes while refusing to carry blame for damage that was not hers. She left evidence that people can change, that compassion and forgiveness are possible even after profound pain, and that maturity lies in holding complexity rather than clinging to simple stories of heroes and villains. This legacy matters deeply for her sons. William and Harry have each struggled with their mother's memory in different ways. William has fiercely protected her image, resisting criticism and honoring her through charity and parenting. Yet this devotion has sometimes confined him to a simplified version of Diana, a flawless princess destroyed by a cruel system. Harry, meanwhile, has drawn on Diana's memory to validate his rebellion against the royal institution, seeing in her suffering permission for his own departure and criticism. Diana's archive offers both sons something far more constructive. It gives them a fully human mother, imperfect, wounded, but actively striving to grow wiser and kinder. William is learning that his mother did not need him to defend an idealized image. She would have wanted him to see her clearly and to learn from both her strengths and her flaws. Harry is learning that while Diana's struggles with the system were real, she was also moving toward forgiveness and reconciliation rather than simply escape. For both princes, this fuller picture can be healing. It frees them from maintaining simplified myths and allows them to integrate their mother's humanity into their own lives. The legacy Diana left also reshapes how the public might remember her. The ongoing fixation, the flowers, the documentaries, the endless retelling of her death has often frozen her in tragedy. Diana herself would likely have been uncomfortable being turned into a symbol rather than remembered as a person. Her archive opens the door to a more mature collective memory, one that remembers her growth as well as her pain, her forgiveness alongside her suffering. For the monarchy, this legacy is both challenging and redemptive. Diana's critiques were not wrong. The institution failed her in real ways. Yet her archive also shows she did not want its destruction, but its reform, so her sons could serve without being broken. This offers the royal family a path forward, to honor Diana not by defending old systems, but by changing them with compassion. King Charles especially now has the chance to make Diana's evolution toward understanding part of his own legacy. He cannot undo the past, but he can build what she hoped for, a monarchy that balances duty with humanity. In her final letter to Charles, Diana wrote something that captures the legacy she was shaping. We cannot undo the past or erase the pain we caused each other, but we can choose what we become from here. I am choosing forgiveness, not because you have earned it or because the hurt was not real, but because I deserve to be free from bitterness. I hope someday you might do the same. This is the legacy Diana really left, not instructions for revenge or evidence for prosecution, but an example of someone choosing emotional freedom through the difficult work of forgiveness and self-awareness. Charles has now received this gift decades too late to respond to Diana directly, but not too late to let it transform how he lives the rest of his life and how he approaches his role as king. King Charles stands at Windsor Castle now, carrying the weight of Diana's secret, forever changed by what he has learned. He cannot go back and make different choices. He cannot give Diana the understanding and support she needed while she was alive. But he can honor what she became, implement what she hoped for, and ensure that her evolution toward wisdom and compassion becomes part of how history remembers both of them. And perhaps, in doing so, he can finally give Diana something she never received during her marriage: genuine recognition of who she truly was beneath the princess and the icon in the headlines. A complicated, struggling, ultimately generous human being who deserved better than she got, but who refused to let damage define her forever. That is the secret King Charles has discovered, and it changes everything. If this story moved you and gave you a new perspective, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue bringing thoughtful stories like this to life.